Well, hello and welcome to the Profit Express. I'm Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every Wednesday so you can be prepared to win the battle for business. That's right. Now listen, I know you're out there. You're closing deals. You're making money. You're turning prospects into profits. So I've got to make it worth your while. That's why I have on the kind of guest that you can listen, learn, and earn from. Today's show will be no exception because I'm the guest. That's right. It's yours truly. Now, the topic for today's show came to me really in this past week. And I was talking to a number of my clients right in the field, and there was a recurring theme, a recurring question. It was a recurring conversation that was coming up. A number of business owners, my very clients, sales managers, VPs of sales, they've been concerned with what about the next generation of sales professional? The people who are entering the field right now, the people who are typically in their 20s, are they ready? Are they prepared to do what it takes to succeed in sales? And there is concern out there. So what do I mean? Well, it's clear that we are in the digital age of sales. Of course, with online, with social media, with video. We're absolutely in the digital age of sales. Now, for the new generation, that's obviously, it's a positive because they've been brought up and they've grown up in the digital age. But that's not really what today's business owners are concerned with when they're looking for the next generation sales professional. They know they'll do fine with digital. What they're really concerned with is, does today's newest generation of sales professional have what it takes to be a grinder? I was just thinking, Tim, grinder, what do you mean by that? Well, very simply, when you strip away all of the digital, you strip away the online, you strip away social media, video, in the B2B world, the sale is still going to take place face-to-face. And even though we know with digital, the sales professionals entered the sales process later because prospects and customers and clients, they have access to information and research that they didn't have, years ago. So they come to the salesperson, further down the sales process, closer to the decision-making process than ever before. However, what has not gone away and will never go away is the fact that it's face-to-face. There's relationship involved. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Because that's a key element that, digital can help, of course, but it's really not going to be determined by your expertise with digital as it will be your expertise with, do you have what it takes to keep showing up every day? Do you have what it takes to keep showing up after you've been rejected time and time again? That is the question. That is what separates so many successful sales professionals from those who fail, those who succeed, and those who have incredible success. So a grinder, very simply, is a sales professional who keeps showing up regardless of the competition, regardless of what's going on in the economy, regardless of inflation. They keep showing up, regardless of rejection. And listen, this conversation could go in a whole bunch of very interesting angles, if you will, because are the 20-somethings of today, and I could really start some controversy here, are they comfortable with rejection? Do they embrace it? Are they okay with it? Because part of those conversations that I alluded to with my clients, with the business owners, with the VPs of sales, is that the perception of sales is different than it was 10, 20 years ago. A lot of the newer folks entering into the world of sales now, they want to get success this year, their first year out. They want to be at six figures. It doesn't work that way. And if you don't know what it is to grind, if you don't know what it is to deal with, accept, embrace rejection, it's going to be real tough. Now, here's the thing. You're thinking, well, Tim, I'm hearing this. Maybe sales isn't for me. And you're right. Maybe it's not for you. But before you back away from the profession, because we need the next generation, that's for sure. Sales is and will always be, unless you're a born natural athlete who's going to get picked up in the draft. But if you're not that athlete who's going to make their living in professional sports, sales is one of the best opportunities for incredible financial success, for freedom, to be in charge of so much of what you do on a daily basis. but it is not easy. It's not complicated, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work. And I'll throw it out there. Perhaps the younger generation now entering has a problem with rejection because of participation trophies. There, I said it. I don't believe in them. It's a controversial topic. I really don't believe in them. I don't know what purpose they serve other than saying, hey, I showed up, I wore the uniform, where's my trophy? But in the world of sales, there is no second place, there's no third place. As the saying goes, second place is first place loser. Sounds a bit harsh, but hey, that's the reality. And then even if you're not in the world of sales and you're looking for your first job, they're only going to hire one. They could interview 10, 20, or 100 people for the one spot that you're looking for. And if you don't get that spot, guess what? Second place, first place loser. So it sounds harsh. People might think, oh, Tim, this is like old school. What are you talking about here? I don't think it's old school. I think it's reality. I absolutely think it's reality. Because again, in my many years in selling and being a sales performance coach and owning my business, Healy Success Solutions, I have seen that one of the key differentiators in salespeople who do well to salespeople who absolutely crush it is their ability and their willingness. Willingness is really the key word there, to grind. Are you going to show up every day? Are you going to show up when it's hot out, cold out, raining out, snowing out? That's right. When you don't want to be there, when it's a beautiful Friday in the summertime, are you still going to show up? Ask yourself that. Because the ones that do are the ones that make the difference, the ones that can create some really insane success. So, what I want to do today, because again, I had a number of conversations that happened organically with my clients just this past week, and they're saying, where are we going to get the next generation of great sales professionals? Tim, we're worried. And it's really, I think it's become societal. Instant gratification. Everybody's looking at successful models of, the Kardashian-type figures on Instagram. That's not what it's about. And really, if you dug behind the scenes as to how they created their success, as to how they have millions of followers, I'm guaranteeing you, they were grinding before they became the Kardashians of the world. So there's 3 stories that I want to share with you. And you're probably not going to know any of the names of the sales professionals that I'm about to talk about. But they are examples. They are brilliant examples of what it means to grind. So as I share these stories with you, put these stories through your own filter and ask yourself, do I have what it takes to do what this person has done? You got to be honest with yourself. Because if you do, you can outshine an overwhelming majority of today's current competition, I can assure you. So here's the first example. Here's my first story. The name is Joe Addis, A-D-E-S. You don't know the name? You probably don't know the name. Go on YouTube. There's a couple of videos on him. He's been interviewed a number of times. He has since passed. So who is Joe Addis? Joe Addis became a millionaire living on Park Avenue in New York City. How did he do it? Didn't do it with digital, didn't do it with social. He sold for 60 years $5 potato peelers. That's right, $5 potato peelers on the streets of Manhattan, on busy corners at intersections in Manhattan. And he did it 6 days a week for 60 years. And a number of the things that he talked about in some of those interviews, and CBS was one of those interviews. Again, I strongly recommend, after listening to the show today, check out Joe Addis on YouTube. Some great stuff, A-D-E-S, Joe Addis. And he says, listen, never underestimate the power of a small amount of money. Because obviously it's transactional, it's high volume in Joe Addis's world, but he did it 6 days a week, and he did it relentlessly, day in, day out, year in, year out for 60 years to become a millionaire, selling $5 potato peelers, not sexy, right? Not technology, not digital, on the city streets of Manhattan. And he did it, and you'll see the video. He was dressed in a suit every day, not a T-shirt and jeans, a suit. And he had his stand set up, and he had this great table, and he'd have his potato peelers. He'd have his inventory piled high, right? And he'd be slicing and dicing his potatoes, his carrots. And he says, hey, don't buy one, buy 5 because everybody's got 4 friends. It was just the hustle. And it was a countless, relentless, repetition day in and day out. And in this interview that CBS did, they interviewed some of his friends and his family members. And they said about Joe Addis that he was so relentless and so good at selling that he could talk a starving dog off a meat truck. Wow. Have you ever heard that phrase before? I love that quote. Could you, if you're in sales, do you think you have what it takes to talk a starving dog off a meat truck? Let that sink in for a moment. And another great question that they asked Joe Addis was, hey, Joe, what's the craziest thing you've ever sold? And he said this: I sold Christmas trees in February. So this is somebody who knew exactly what it meant to sell. He was out there. He was hawking products each and every day. Nothing sophisticated about it, but it was sheer repetition, sheer tenacity. And he was, what's that word? Oh, yeah, grinding each and every day. Now, I asked myself, would I have what it takes to show up 6 days a week selling potato peels? Probably not my thing. But can you apply that same sort of willingness to what it is you're selling, or if you're thinking of getting into selling? So that was Joe Addis. That's the first story I want to share with you. And again, I'm sharing these not because they're the latest and greatest and the sexy stories on Instagram. They're not. They're not going to be. They're not meant to be. But it's really to share a mindset that, in my opinion, as a guy who's been doing this for going on 30 years, selling and coaching, I don't think that mindset is being taught. And I think that's a real shame, because that kind of mindset, and it doesn't just apply to sales, obviously, it's the Profit Express. That's what we're talking about today. If you have that grinder mentality, it applies to anything, any other job, any other profession, any other hobby, any other skill or sport. If you're grinding, you're succeeding. And again, there could be great examples of professional athletes that are grinding, and I'm sure you know them. So that was story number 1, Joe Addis, which I absolutely love. You got to check out the video of him on YouTube. So here's another one that I want to share with you. This actually has a little bit of history here on the Profit Express. There's a gentleman by the name of Joe Girard. And in 1973, he held the world's record for selling the most amount of cars. In 1973, he sold 1,425 cars. That's a tremendous accomplishment. It's a tremendous number, okay? A typical salesperson, an okay salesperson, sells about 10 a month. Just to put it in perspective, a very good salesperson sells, depending upon the dealership, 20, 30, 40 cars. That's an excellent sales professional in the car sales game, right? So Joe Girard was in Michigan. He was selling for Chevrolet, and he sold 1,425 cars in 1973. And I had him on the show a long time ago. This is probably about 8 or 10 years ago. He has since passed. And as amazing as his record was, and it was a privilege to talk to Joe Girard, an ultimate grinder, the interesting twist to the story here today on the Profit Express is that his record stood for 44 years. So he first said it in 1973, and it wasn't until 2017 that another sales professional, ironically also selling Chevrolets, also in Michigan, broke his record. His name is Ali Rita, and he sold 1,582 cars. So he broke Joe Girard's record, a record that stood for 44 years. So he was so they said, of course he's interviewed a bunch of times, hey, Ali, how did you do it? And he goes, I was getting my rhythm. I was getting into a good place where I was selling about 30, 35 cars a month, which, as I said, you're a very good sales professional if you're selling 30, 35 cars a month. And then he just started to believe, why am I just thinking about 30, 35, or 40? Why can't I sell 100 cars a month? Now that's a staggering number of cars to sell in a month. And he determined that he would do it. And he has his own little company within the dealership. He has a personal assistant, and he had a junior salesperson who would hustle for him and, get the cars on the lot and bring them in for him to show prospective customers. And his one thing that really set him apart, because he said this very clearly, and everybody understands this. Listen, my Chevy is the same as the other Chevy down the street. The same Ford is the same Ford. It's so on and so forth. He's like, so I got to be the relationship guy. I got to be the service guy. So in 2017, he sells 1,582 cars. At that time, 2017, 2018, 2019, he was averaging about 100 cars a month, which again is staggering. And so this is one thing that I thought was interesting. Again, he does have a personal assistant, and he does have a junior sales guy helping him out. He said this. He says, I want every one of my customers to make sure that they call me for everything. Now, what does that mean? Call me for everything. Because if you're selling 100 cars, you're talking to a lot of people. Okay, he's not going to close every single deal. So he said, I would never want one of my customers to call the service department at a dealership and get run around or be put on hold. They call me, I get to them immediately, I get an immediate connection and get them on the calendar with the service center. He's like, if they have a flat tire, I want them to call me. Yes, a flat tire, because he has a connection with the tow truck. He'll get you out there faster than AAA. That is a grinder. And the reason he does this, because we're talking about grinding, but then also relationship. Relationship is really your commitment to excellence, your commitment to the customer, not so much digital, okay? Now, again, digital helps. It's a great tool. We know that. But he doesn't need any new leads. He's only working off of customers at this point, and he's only working off referrals of those customers. Because anytime anybody needs a car, what he has done is he has ensured with his customers that if his customers are talking to a friend or a family member and the need for a car comes up, what's the first name that's going to come up? Ali Rita. That is right. And he knows that. He's ensured that because he works relentlessly at servicing. He works relentlessly at keeping them happy, so they're never going to think of anybody else. He gets the first call. That's a grinder. So again, you can be amazing with your digital acumen and your ability to do phenomenal videos. And that's a huge plus. Don't get me wrong. That's a huge advantage that the new generation of sales professionals has, that so many of the folks who've been in the business for 30 years might not have. So think of it this way. Optimize your ability to be great at digital. Make those connections. Brand yourself. Get out great content consistently. But then when you get to the point where the customer comes into your store or you visit them, you're on the call, you're face-to-face with them, that's when your ability to be relentless at understanding their problem, at understanding their desire, their need, what are they looking for, and then positioning your solution and never stopping until you get to that yes. That is what is going to separate you. But do you have the stomach? Do you have the intestinal fortitude that Joe Addis had 6 days a week for 60 years? Honestly, I probably wouldn't have that kind of fortitude myself. And Ali Rita, 1,582 cars, 100 a month on average. When a good salesperson, very good salesperson is doing 20, 30, he's doing 4 and 5 times that amount. Think about that. That's mind-blowing. So I just thought the topic was interesting. And I've talked about the topic with clients many times in the past few years, past 5 years. It's become more and more apparent. But when it came up 3 times in the past week, I'm like, you know what? I want to talk about it on the show. Because I've been asked when I've been interviewed, I've been on other podcasts, newspapers, etc., and they say, hey, Tim, what kind of salesperson would you most like to have? And without hesitation, I will give this answer every single time, and I say I want a grinder. I want somebody who might not be as slick, and as polished, who might not do the best videos, who might not have the best Instagram profile or LinkedIn profile, but every day of the week, I will take somebody who's going to go out relentlessly each and every day, who laughs at rejection, could care less about no's, and does not stop. I will take that person every day without fail. Now, the third story I want to share with you today, as great as the Joe Addis story is, as great as the Ali Rita story is, and they truly are phenomenal stories, there's one story that is powerful. It's funny as hell. I love it. And it's actually one of my current clients, a client that I've been fortunate enough to have a relationship going on almost 20 years. And I've heard this story countless times from my client, at trainings, at conferences, over dinners, over coffee. Over those almost 20 years, he shared the story with me a number of times because it's such a powerful story. So here's how it goes. So my client is one of two founders of an industrial company. They make industrial coatings. And he was visiting a client that he hadn't seen, and he was just going to get in the field as the owner and make some rounds and say hello to some clients he hadn't talked to in a while. So he's talking to this one client in Manhattan, and the client asks him, he's like, hey, whatever happened to that sales guy, Joe Caputi? I haven't seen him in a while. And he's like, well, Joe decided to move down to Florida. And he's like, Andy, he's like, I got to tell you, Andy's the owner. He's like, Andy, I got to tell you this story about Joe Caputi. So Joe Caputi was the sales guy for this client. He'd been his sales guy for a number of years. And if you're in sales, I'm sure you're familiar with the term making your rounds, visiting your territory, your book of business. So one day, Joe Caputi steps in to the office of this client that he'd been doing business with for years. And he's trying to drum up business, what Joe did best. And he's talking about, hey, what about this opportunity? What about that opportunity? What about this facility? What about this equipment, this machinery? And at the time, which happens, the customer really didn't have anything going on that Joe could help him with. So he thought that Joe would just say, okay, hey, thanks, good seeing you. I'll talk to you soon. But that was not Joe Caputi. No. So Joe was relentless as he's telling the story to my client, and he didn't take no for an answer. So the customer was getting desperate to get rid of him, right? So he's like, Andy, I had to think of something to do to get rid of Joe. He just wasn't getting the hint. So he's like, Joe, listen, I got to go to the men's room, all right? I'll talk to you later. Have a good day. So the gentleman goes to the men's room. He sits in the stall. About a minute later, Joe Caputi follows him in, and Joe takes a seat in the stall right next to him. And he says, listen, I thought you might like something to read while you're in here. And he slides a brochure under the stall to his customer. Now, there's a number of things I can say about this story. Number one, I wish I did that. I wish I could claim the story was mine, but I can't. It's Joe Caputi. Now, before we say, oh, Tim, you can't do that, right? Because that could be a reaction to some people. How do you follow a customer into the bathroom and slide a brochure under it, under the stall? I say, why can't you? Think about it. Do you have that kind of confidence? Like I said, I wish I did. I wish I thought of it. It's creative. It's ballsy. I love it. It's fantastic. Now, maybe in certain industries it doesn't fly, and I can appreciate that. I'll even let you get away with that. Tim, I'm not going to follow a client into the restroom. Okay, that's fine. But do you have your own idea of tenacity or creativity or pushing the envelope and not giving up and being that grinder that Joe Caputi was? Because you know what? If you own it and you embrace it, a lot of people are going to be okay with it. They're not going to be offended. But do you have that in you? That's the question. Because it's the Joe Addis of the world, the Ali Ritas of the world, the Joe Caputis. They're not household names. They're not social media sensations. But they are grinders. And they are probably, and again, I've spoken to and dealt with from training, from conversations, thousands of sales professionals in a host of industries, B2C, B2B. And the likes of an Addis, a Rita, and a Caputi, they're about, in my estimation, maybe about, probably, if I'm being generous, less than 5% of the sales professionals out there. A lot of sales professionals, I hate to say it, they're mailing it in. But let me go back to this. Sales still, if you're not the natural-born athlete who's going to get picked up in the NFL draft, is one of the absolute best professions for creating success, for creating insane wealth. And also, if you're in the right organization, if you're a great salesperson for that organization, you're going to get a lot of freedom. Life will be good. Promise you that. If you're working for the right organization. So, digital is fine. Digital is a great tool that can do phenomenally amazing things with your branding, with awareness. Okay? So, become great at it. Video is a critical tool nowadays. All right? I just want to make sure we're all clear here. I'm not poo-pooing digital by any sense. But it's especially in the B2B world, when you get to that point and it comes time to present, to qualify, and going belly to belly, eyeball to eyeball, digital's importance vanishes. It's who you are as a sales professional. Do you have what it takes? So this is the Profit Express. I'm so fortunate to have clients that we can have these conversations and great topics pop up for the show, topics that I'm super passionate about, as you can tell. So I want to share it with you today. I'd love to hear what you think. Drop us comments. You can follow the show on Instagram at The Profit Express, on YouTube at The Profit Express. Follow us, of course, on Twitter at Profit_Express. And as always, I want to make sure I say thank you to those who matter so much to the show, the friends and the sponsors of the show, in particular, Corbett Public Relations. Visit them at CorbettPR.com, CORBETTPR.com, because they're out there promoting and protecting businesses and brands for over 30 years. So remember to be on the lookout for great shows like the one you just heard today with yours truly, Tim Healy of The Profit Express, every Wednesday, the kind of shows that can help you win the battle for business. And until next time.